And hey everybody, welcome to the Daily Space Weather. I'm your host Dan, aka smAsho. Today we're talking about the fact that the coronal mass ejection watch continues for day 3. We'll be looking at a coronal hole and a bunch of different views of the sun for all of you stargazers out there. We're already into electron flux warning levels, and new volcanoes have showed up on the list. It's exciting. Here's a composite view of the local yellow dwarf. In 211, 304, and 171 angstroms, we see 0 sunspots, coronal hole just moving out of the Earth-facing zone here. Expect a coronal hole wind stream from that in about 3 days. Here's another composite view. This is 335, 193, and 94 angstroms. As we try to jam-pack as much information as we can into the daily space weather videos. We're going to blast through a ton of information today. Let's take a look at what's going on at Lagrange point 5, where stereo A is located. First, a difference image, and allow me to unimage. And so you can see there is a little bit of plasma there that could eject at any moment with absolutely no warning. And to me, it looks like the beginning of that coronal mass ejection. I still say it's going to happen. It's just quite difficult to predict when. And remember, folks, we don't need sunspots or solar flares to produce coronal mass ejections. We've been covering it on the channel for a couple of years. And if you're wondering what was going on in detail with the sun in the last couple of years, go check our older videos. We've got a playlist for it. And the 10.7 centimeter radial flux still at 76. A little bit of a stall here in the ramp up into cycle 25. So there's the 1-year chart to put the radial flux into context. And I've zoomed in here on the sunspot number and the radial flux on the Space Weather Enthusiast's dashboard, just to show you how proportional sunspot number and the 10.7 centimeter radial flux are. So we've moved this back to summer of 2016, and you can see those graphs are quite proportional. And it looks like they haven't filled in the latest information on that. Again, there's the 1-year chart of the radial flux. That one's available at solon.info. Next, looking at a chart of the solar system. Here's where stuff is now. There's where things will be in a week. Mercury will be swinging through the Earth and Sun region in about 9 days. Next, I've pulled up a star chart here. It's in-the-sky.org. Today, I also put in the celestial pole. And let me just check and see what's happened to Epic Pen here. Epic Pen, what have you done to me, Epic Pen? So there we've put in the celestial pole there. You can see Polaris. And all of the stars in the sky just circle around the celestial pole. If you weren't aware, another one of our celestial pole stars is Cygnus. That is, Deneb is actually one of our celestial pole stars. And since Epic Pen is refusing to function once again, you are out of here. See ya. And by the way, we've got an entire thread on our forum, smashomash.com/forum, in the cosmology forum about this particular star here, which is actually a high-mass X-ray binary. Anyway, there's where stars are located. The moon moving into a setting mode here, moving out of the constellation Leo into Gemini. I don't know if that matters to you or means anything. We've got some fantastic helioviewer movies once again today. There's the view in 193 angstroms. Again, we see 0 sunspots. So here's 304 angstroms. This is 1 full day. And you can see a bunch of plasma filaments in both the northeast and southeast. An occultation happening there. And a plasma filament actually in the northwest as well. We'll show you close-ups of them all by the end of the video. And if I had to guess where the flaring was coming from, I would guess it was from former sunspot 2800. And indeed, you can see the flare coming out of there. Great view of the reverberations of that flare, which happened just around midnight. And again, we'll show you more close-ups of that a little later in the video. Here it is in 171 angstroms. There you can see that small solar flare happen. Did not appear to be accompanied by a coronal mass ejection. Here it is in 94 angstroms. And let's continue on to a whole bunch more data, as lots of interesting and exciting things happening. Perhaps some scary and spooky things indeed as well. And thanks for leaving comments, JapDX. JapDX says, seems like it's lining up, smAsho, the planets. I don't know what he means, but in any case, thanks for leaving a comment. We are streaming live right now to Twitch. It's twitch.tv/smAshoMash. Let's take a look at what's going on with volcanoes, and we've got some interesting information here on the list, including Orangutan. But more importantly, some information about Pinatubo, which is by far the largest the largest volcano having erupted in my lifetime, having blown up in 1991. Pinatubo back on the list. Let's go down the whole list. Klyuchevskoy on the Kamchatka Peninsula is producing a 20,000-foot ash plume. Abiko, flight level 120, 12,000-foot ash plume there. And check out what it says about Pinatubo. A bunch of small earthquakes have been happening on Pinatubo around the Sokovia lineament, a fault that was last active during the post-eruption period of 1991. So, I don't know if you were aware or not, on April 22nd, 2019, a 6.1 earthquake on the southern foot of Pinatubo caused some fatalities and damage to buildings, roads, and other structures. I'm sure we covered it on the Daily Space Weather. Next, looking at Orangutan, which is now back on the list. Excuse me, it's producing an 8,000-foot ash plume. Popocatépetl exploding down there in Mexico, flight level 200. Sangay exploding, flight level 220. Revenador exploding, flight level 140. And Sabancaya exploding, flight level 240. It's a 24,000-foot ash plume, which is nothing to fly your hang glider, wingsuit, or home-built kit aircraft over. Next, we'll do earthquakes. And we see a major lull in earthquakes here, a very low number of earthquakes over the past 24 hours, and a continuing drought of 7, 8, and 9 magnitude quakes. We'll just scroll up the list here. Looks like we barely even saw anything in the 5 magnitude range. And earthquake droughts typically end in earthquakes in everybody's experience. Again, the 7, 8, and 9 magnitude earthquake drought continues throughout this lull in earthquakes. No particular quakes to comment on there. Next, we'll look at the real-time solar wind. And actually, let me check the life of the stream first. And again, thanks for leaving comments, JapDX. If you'd like to elaborate on what you mean by planetary alignments, I have no idea what you're talking about or why that would be relevant to anything. But in any case, here's the real-time solar wind data. And we saw some shifts in the phi angle here recently. A small uptick here in the solar wind density. Current solar wind density condition is at 4.73 protons per cubic centimeter. Solar wind speed down to basically background levels here at 381 kilometers per second. And it's been steady over the past 24 hours. KP index currently at 1. That's a measurement of global geomagnetism, if you were wondering. And thanks for tuning in if you're a new viewer. Next, we'll look at 4 hours of magnetosphere movies. And you'll see a fairly steady pressure here. This is 4 hours of data courtesy University of Michigan. And if you're wondering what's in my coffee, well, it's Ethiopian coffee. It's organic. And it's got cocoa and cayenne pepper sprinkled in there. a heaping teaspoon of cocoa, and about, I don't know, maybe half of a teaspoon of cayenne pepper. I like my food so hot that I see God while dining. And we had hot wings last night. So there's the ground magnetic perturbations. I'll let it play through a second time here as it's refreshed. Looking at changes in the Earth's B field, otherwise known as geospace delta B. And since we're living through a geomagnetic excursion, we show this daily on the channel. At least you get 4 hours of data. Let's do a quick cosmology segment. We're going to pick a random number between 1 and 1031 using the quantum number generator. Today's quantum number is 440, which will coincide with something here at the Neil Gorell Swift-Bat X-ray Observatory. And if you scroll down, you'll find that 440 is FK-COM, a variable star. Pretty cool. All right. There's the X-ray output of that variable star, and in terms of X-ray, it's not all that variable. Quite consistent going back the past 15 years, which is this upper right graph. And it actually has shut off here for a couple days in the past week. Let's see what it looks like on Sinbad. So rotationally variable star, that's very interesting, as the rotation of a star is super important in terms of its behavior. FK-COM. All right, let's check it out on the 2-mass. There it is in infrared light. Does it show up on the Chandra? And there it is on the multi-mirror XMM Newton project. And it's not going to show up on gamma ray. Let's check it on the red light spectrum. Another good view of that on Aladdin light. It's number 440 on the Neil Gorell Swift-Bat X-ray Observatory. FK-COM, which is probably short for something. I have no idea what it's short for. And to quote Einstein, never memorize something that you can look up. And that's today's cosmology segment. Let's move on, as there's plenty more interesting stuff to cover. By the way, again, we are streaming live to Twitch. It's twitch.tv/smashamash. Thanks to our followers over there. Thanks again for commenting, JapDX. And if you follow me on Twitter, you may have seen this little poll here. And whenever I do these polls, I always explain what my answer would have been. And my answer would have been Fauci herd immunity fraud. Now, the consensus on this one was that Your Vote Counts was the largest fraud in the year 2020. The other choices were masks and lockdowns work, and the fraud about the COVID-19 mortality rate. I consider Fauci's fraud about herd immunity to be the largest fraud in the year 2020. To quote Fauci, when polls said only half of all Americans would take a vaccine, I was saying herd immunity would take 70 to 75%. Then when newest surveys said 60% or more would take it, I thought I could nudge this up a bit, so I went to 80, 85, That's an awful nice population you got there. Be a shame if it got vaccinated against its will, By the way, we invite you all to visit our own website, smashamash.com. Smashamash.org will redirect you there. You can find all of our social media links there, as well as links to our forum and to our stores. There are 3 of them now, including the SmAsho merch store, which is the newest one. Go check it out. It's on Redbubble. And you can get yourself a Fauci committed fraud item there, if you like. Also a Dimension of the Year Hell product. There's like 50 products in each category. Or if you'd like a Google is biased product, perhaps check out this Google-defined zipped hoodie. Are you still using Google as a verb? We're hoping not. In any case, thanks to our viewers over at YouTube, and thanks for everybody who views the live premieres and so on. Remember, folks, I'm not only SmAsho Mash, I'm also a client. And part of the reason I make the videos is because I watch them myself, because I want to see a lot of the data on a big screen, and my computer monitor is not the size of the TV downstairs. And we also show these to friends and family. Share them with your friends, your foes, your science noobs and science pros. Please press like and subscribe, press the notification bell, visit our links, support the channel, etc. Thanks to our subs over on BitChute as well. We see a steady increase in our subscribers over on BitChute, and we would encourage all of our viewers to branch out into alt tech, as the censorship is a little bit lower. Our main source of funding for the content is our patrons. Please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/smashamash. Thanks to our latest patrons, expect to appear in the credit crawl early in the month of February. We update it every month, and patrons are listed. Only active patrons are listed, and they're listed in order of lifetime contribution. So thanks again, patrons, the true source of funding for the content, patreon.com/smashamash. And let's get back to some data. Here's just a diagram of the atmosphere. So this is showing you the penetration of electromagnetic radiation from the sun, as well as the temperature of the thermosphere at solar minimum versus solar maximum, as well as the altitudes of things like the F ionosphere layer, which is the red F being shown there on the right side. And that's where the GOES 16 makes its measurements. And we saw a solar flare happening actually as I did show prep today. It waned right as I started the live stream. So there's the GOES X-ray flux over the past 3 days. No major solar flares, just that little B-class. And we showed you the slightly larger B-class flare that happened just before midnight. That one occurred at... Peak flux happened at 23:10 Universal Time. We don't see any proton strikes. We show this daily because when coronal mass ejections start a-coming, the protons start a-fluxing, and we start a-reporting. This is actually 3 different energy levels of protons, 10, 50, and 100 mega electron volts, also measured by the GOES 16 at the F ionosphere layer. And the magnetometer has been quite spiky here over the past 3 days. There's the GOES magnetometer. And we'll show you the current sheet next on the Gong 2 data. So here's the top view ecliptic plane field plot. And the Earth is currently quite solidly in the South Pole current sheet. Let's bring up the latest image. Keep in mind the data is about 2 hours old and can change with absolutely no warning. And we've got some very direct field force lines over here out by stereo A, that's Lagrange point 5 right there. Here's Lagrange point 4. And expect to be in the South Pole current sheet for the foreseeable future. Here's a line of sight coronal hole plot. This also shows you the sun's B field in blue. And we've got some South Pole oriented coronal hole just rotating out of the Earth facing zone here. Again, expect the coronal hole wind stream from that in about 3 days. Here's another view of the same data. Basically, it also shows you the solar magnetogram, as well as the poloidal fields. Those are the fields emanating from the poles. And lastly, we'll show you the magnetic environment of the sun's atmosphere, known as the corona. This shows you open potential field surface source lines in either black or purple, depending on where they're located, and closed potential field force lines in pink. Next, we're looking at 1 day of the ionosphere, and it's actually looking pretty normal here. Nothing too exciting to report on there. We'll bring up the latest image. That latest image is from 10:30 Universal Time, and this is available at the Australian Government Bureau of Meteorology Space Weather Services page. So we see high levels of electron flux here, not quite as high as were forecasted. And they're expecting to see them wane here, and I would agree, although in 3 days we're expecting this to be even lower, probably back all the way down to here again as a coronal hole wind stream strikes. And keep in mind, high levels of electron flux can cause differences in how coronal mass ejections strike the magnetosphere. I won't get too in-depth into it. We do see some charging hazards. They're pretty minor. Internal charging over the southern hemisphere there, just south of the equator. Nothing to really worry about there. And again, we are currently in electron flux warning levels. And let me just check the life of the stream once again before we continue on. And everything looks just fine. So that's the 3-day electron flux chart. And again, we are expecting this to drop down over the next couple of days. Here's a total electron content forecast, a visualization of essentially the inner Van Allen belt. This shows you the electron density in between your GPS handset and your GPS satellites, which orbit at about 12,500 miles, a geosynchronous orbit. And there's a diagram of that scenario. It also shows you the altitude of things like the International Space Station, which is where you would want to be. If you went into space, you would want to be at the International Space Station at about 230 miles, a low Earth orbit. And here's a one-year chart of the electron flux just to put that into context, especially for you new viewers. Thanks again for tuning in. Now we're looking at the jet streams. Moving a little bit closer to home here, the jet streams on planet Earth. Please leave us a comment if you're viewing from a different timeline, universe, multiverse, plane of existence, planet, spaceship, galaxy, solar system, etc. So there's the southern hemisphere jet streams, and we're mixing it up a little bit. Here are the northern hemisphere jet streams, a little bit less coherent up north. Let's move on to more meteorology topics. I would note the low clouds here over the Atlantic Ocean. Significant low clouds here once again, as well as a powerful low pressure system off the coast of the U.S. And here's a real-time lightning map, courtesy lightningmaps.org. Pretty calm when it comes to lightning right now. Next, we're looking at a Doppler radar map, and the snow in eastern California is incredible. The snow in the Tahoe area, we're measuring it in feet and not inches. Apparently, it's so hot that it's cold. As we were told for years and indeed decades that Florida would be mostly underwater by now and so on. Let's check the sea thickness, the sea ice thickness in the Arctic region. So here's a map. There you go. There's a map of the Arctic. That is as of yesterday. And it looks pretty icy. It does not look ice-free to me. What say you? Now, keep in mind, the levels are pretty low here. You can see we're actually outside the lower part of the 20-year average here. I'm sorry, 10-year average. So we are outside the 10-year average, although ice should continue to grow until May or so. So in any case, the Arctic is not ice-free. And let's take a look at the snow extent, as it's quite extensive. So, geez, it looks pretty snowy in the northern hemisphere to me. Are you worried about climate change? Now, this year's snow mass balance is nowhere near what we saw in the past 3 snow seasons, but we are still a little bit above the 30-year average, much less than 1 standard deviation above. The last 3 winters, by the way, saw 2 standard deviations above normal snowfall in terms of snow mass balance, not to be confused with snow extent. And here's another snow extent viewer. I would also note the cold anomalies in the equatorial Pacific Ocean. It is summer in the southern hemisphere, by the way. That image was from November, incidentally. Now we're going to show you a snow forecast. Here is the Euro forecast through Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And it looks like Pennsylvania's been downgraded. Now they're showing we've got nothing in Lehigh Valley. I didn't mean to click on that link there. Looks like we're going to get a heap and helping of nothing as of the current Euro forecast. But let's go over here and look at California. Keep in mind this is snow depth, so this is going to show existing snowfall as well. Look at the totals around the Yosemite Valley area. Expecting to see 60 inches of snow around Yosemite. Anyway, there's the Euro snow forecast map. Again, that's the European forecast. Here's the GFS forecast map. And we'll advance this to Monday at 1800 Universal Time. So you can see a big difference here in the GFS forecast versus the Euro forecast. Still incredible amounts of snow expected to fall, fresh snow to fall in East Central California. And the GFS forecast still calling for a few inches of snow here in Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania. Some significant snow there in northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, northern Ohio, the Great Lakes region. Next, looking at a water vapor map for the Americas. Actually, before I do that, let me just make sure that we are good to go, as I don't always tune into my own stream in other ways. Here's a water vapor situation for the Americas. Shout out to our viewers from South America. Please tell your friends and foes about the videos. And thanks to all of our international viewers. High pressure system pushing out into the Atlantic Ocean right now. Great view of that. As well as a strong rotating low in between Greenland and eastern Canada. Here's a view of the cloud layer. And you can see that counterclockwise rotating low there just north of Bermuda. And check out the low clouds over the Atlantic Ocean. Major low clouds there. And it looks like we have a spaceship. Yeah, a spaceship. For real. Let's see if we can catch it. There we go. Tell your silliest YouTube channel that we've captured a spaceship. See right there. Clearly a spaceship. Keep in mind the resolution on these maps is actually 2 kilometers. I don't know if you're aware. In other words, if you zoom all the way in, 1 pixel would be 2 kilometers. And check out the atmospheric river stretching all the way from southern Nevada to North Dakota. A major atmospheric river forming there, tons of moisture in the atmosphere. Again, here's the cloud layer. And here's water vapor. And that's 3.9 nanometers radiation. If you're wondering, that's how we view clouds at nighttime when it's too dark to see them using the visible satellite. And hey, thanks everybody again for tuning in. We've got bonus features here. Please don't forget to press like and subscribe. Share the content on your social media. View our playlists. If you haven't checked out our playlists, we've got quite a few of them, and we're getting more thanks to the Smash team. Again, visit our website, smashomash.com, smashomash.org. We'll redirect you, etc. And the bonus features will be the solar intensitygram to show you 0 sunspots, the colorized magnetogram to show you where new sunspots may be forming. Let's do that first. And there's the colorized magnetogram. This is sunspot 2800. And there are some areas of slight magnetic organization happening. My favorite is this one up here. Here's the intensitygram to show you 0 sunspots. And wait till you see today's HelioViewer movies. They are fantastic. So we'll start out with 131 angstroms. Just bear with me one moment. Allow me to vanish. And there's 131 angstroms, one of the ionized emission spectral states of ionized iron. And we saw some filamentary behavior in this wavelength in the northwest. So we decided to zoom in on that area. You can see that protruding iron plasma filament there, as well as that solar flare, a close-up of that. Here's the southern hemisphere, that coronal hole that will be sending that has already sent a coronal hole wind stream our way. Great view of that coronal hole. I don't know what number it is. although you can find out at solon.info. And here's the northern hemisphere. You'll see a solar flare right about there. And you can see the reverberations across the solar surface from that. I'll let it play through a second time, as this is the best wavelength for this particular flare. Here's a giant filament in the northeast. And this is going to give you some great three-dimensional perspective on this filament, largely suspended in the corona above the chromosphere. Fantastic view of that. Let it play through one more time here. And this is just one of 3 different plasma filaments that could eject at any moment. So this is why the coronal mass ejection watch continues. Here's the filaments in the northwest. These are least likely to end up in an Earth-facing zone. And again, remember, folks, we don't need to see solar flares or sunspots to see coronal mass ejections. We've covered it time and time again on the channel. And here's the most likely set of filaments to erupt in your general direction. It's the southeastern limb. And again, there's a lot of plasma currently suspended in the corona between the local yellow dwarf and your location. So that's all she wrote. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Remember, stare at the sun, don't drink, and if you do, don't drive. Seriously, don't drive. And since it'll never be now again, welcome to the Neo Renaissance. May that solar wind be at your back.